Friends, Happy New Year, and thank you for joining us. We have Mark Turi returning for interview number 3, interview slash Q&A, because we don't know how many questions are gonna come in the chat. Please feel free to ask anything based on the previous 2 interviews that we gave, anything on Scientology or anything that covers the basic theme of the channel, which you guys are aware of. So basically, please feel free to answer your questions. And in the meantime, first of all, Mark, thank you for joining us for a 3rd time. That seems to be
Sure.
the magic number. We had Marcus on last time for 3 chats, or for 3 times, and he's in the chat. What's up, Marcus? And how are you doing, man? Happy New Year, brother.
Yeah, same to you. Happy New Year.
Thanks, man.
Doing well. Just hanging out basically. Not too
Where are
much
you
is
hanging
open,
out?
so
Where are you at?
well, I'm back home. I'm back home in
Okay.
Hungary. But yeah, I was in last time. I was in Romania just doing research and traveling, but now I am home, and home is where the heart is, as they say. But everything is basically closed, like it is everywhere else, and just hanging in. I've watched movies and TV shows the last couple days because there's not much else to watch and
That's
do.
what I've been doing.
So that's it. Yeah. But what about you, Doug? How was your holidays?
As you know, my family situation, it's a little weird because I haven't seen
Yeah.
my family. It's kind of like, as they say in
Yeah.
Scientology, Mark, looking at the world from an exterior viewpoint, because I watch
Yeah.
everybody running around,
Yeah.
getting in their cars, and it's okay, man. I'm over it.
Yeah.
But it's been about, I don't know, at least 10 years since we've done a Christmas or anything with the family.
Mm,
So it is weird, man. Every time Thanksgiving, Christmas rolls around, I see everybody active. And you know what, bro? Part of me is like thankful for
yeah.
that, because everybody has holiday stress around the family. And with Scientology, it
Yeah.
just adds more to that. So I got to tell you, bro, it's a
Hmm.
bit of a
Yeah.
relief just to be able to kick off my shoes and kick it by myself, which I did on Christmas. And I actually spent it
Oh,
watching this
cool.
documentary on Casey Anthony, which I don't know if
Oh,
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Okay. Little
Yeah, it
bit.
was
A little bit. Yeah.
was almost a waste of time. It's 3 episodes. I don't know if you guys have seen it,
Hmm.
but Casey Anthony is I would call her a narcissist, a sociopath, whatever you want to call it, a compulsive liar who was up on allegations for murdering her child named Kaylee. And remarkably enough, in episode 3, they do make the case that her father was a pedophile and actually might have sexually abused. The whole family seems messed up, but that was a pretty
Yeah.
interesting documentary, which changed my mind a little bit on that. Anyways, guys, speaking of like narcissist and new age cults and stuff, Mark's going to tell us about some of his experiences when he was out. So let me just give a quick recap. On interview number 1, and both of these are linked in the description, guys, Mark told us his basic story. And interview number 2, we talked about Hollywood and their influence, Scientology's influence in Hollywood. It's what that's called, where we talked about a whole bunch of stuff relating to that. And then this 3rd interview, we're going to kind of pick it up from Mark's experience. So he was 22 years old in 2005 when he got sucked into he was just on vacation from Canada, and he got sucked into the L. Ron Hubbard Life Exhibition. And before he knew it, he was taken to Scientology. And from 2007 to 2008, he had a hellish, mind-blowing staff experience, which we covered in part 1. So we're going to pick it up from in 2009 when he has some information to share with us. I don't know if you guys know, but out here in LA, it's kind of like cult central. We've covered it a lot on the channel. You guys know what happened with Manson and the Laurel scene, and then
Mhm.
the neighbor San Francisco. There's a lot of serial killers came out of here in that particular 60s, 70s, and 80s. So cult, serial killers, mind control, like if you want any of that, come to Hollywood because it's got everything. So he's going to tell us about some of the various groups that he was checking out after Scientology in 2009. And to start that off, we're going to start off with a question from L. Ron Hubbard himself. By the way, this is not really L. Ron Hubbard. He is a very
Oh,
cool
nuts.
guy, but he threw up a question on the community chat last night, and he said, "Doug, love to know your views on Teal Swan." Um, how many of you guys out there know who Teal Swan is? We've talked about her a bit in the past, and she's a typical narcissist that runs a new age cult. And my thoughts on her, L. Ron Hubbard, are just that. There's a million of them, by the way, online now that are trying to shill their wares. So cult leaders have kind of transferred to YouTube and social media. And I'm going to show you real quick. I hope I don't get a freaking copyright strike on this, because last time, Mark, I had to
Yeah,
re-upload the fucking thing and it was a big pain in the
that's
ass
right.
because we ran Saturday Night Live. So
Yep.
this is just a
Yes, we
trailer.
did.
So what the fuck, man? This is just a
I
trailer.
know.
So this should be fine to run. But let me show you guys what we're talking about with Teal Swan so you can be aware of the plethora of people like her. And this is a documentary, by the way, on Hulu called The Deep End, which is excellent in showing who Teal really is. And she was none too happy when this came out. So let's check this out real quick. Then I'll finish up, answer that question, and then we'll lead into Mark's adventures in Hollywood with similar groups.
What we're going to be doing is what I call channeling. It's an incredibly dangerous process. It's also one of the most powerful tools that has ever existed.
Don't you tell another lie.
This is Teal Swan.
Don't you
To her followers, she's a savior.
You've got equal amounts of joy and power as you do despair.
Teal Swan has over 145 million views online.
I got a tattoo.
I never heard anyone
You saved my life.
speak so much truth. I feel like she's Jesus.
When I first met Teal, I was just kind of awestruck in a way. Teal experienced the worst of the worst, and she knows I would die for this.
We hired a private investigator.
My job is to try to figure out if this is a cult or not.
We've had members leave.
What do you think about this list?
Most of it is illegal.
The people in my life have to be more dedicated to mission. If you want to come within 50 miles of me, you better be ready for the deepest end of the pool.
Ooh.
It's like, what are you willing to do for this cause? I was so washed. I'd be willing to kill someone and bury them in the backyard.
I feel like I am this spokesperson for every lost toy. How many of you feel like you're not doing okay?
Try to find the truth in this mess.
It's not what I thought it would be. You feel like an adversary to me.
She started something that's grown beyond her control.
If I say I'd like to get to the point where I'm more spiritually influential than the Pope, some people will be like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen.
That's right. That's not going to happen. So there you go, guys. A lovely Teal Swan.
Wow.
Don't you just want to run out and,
Wow.
yeah, exactly. And by the way, Mark, check this out. This
Yeah.
is her YouTube channel, and she has 1.49 million subscribers, and
Yeah.
definitely some of those are bot. And I would totally play some of these guys,
Yeah.
but her company fricking sent me in the mail a threatening letter, kind of like fair game, not to use any of her content. I put up a little piece of her content on YouTube, Mark, and I was going to do commentary on her just to show narcissists and new age cults and stuff. And her company actually sent me a threatening letter. It was set at private, by the way. It wasn't even going to go out. And I've never had any problems setting something to private. And her company actually sent me this like Scientology fair game threatening letter or whatever, dude. So fuck you, Teal. I mean, I don't like people like
stuff,
this that take advantage of people. But anyways,
my
so
God.
that's her, guys. And by the way, regards narcissism, we have HG Tudor coming back on January 23rd, I believe. And we're going to do a 3-part cult series on, I'm going to explain my experience, and he's going to break down how people get sucked in from the perspective of a narcissist. Anyways, enough of me rambling, Mark. Could you please tell us some of the, so you get out of Scientology in 2008, you're kicking it in Los Angeles in 2009. And let's start off with the, what's that? Guys, right next to the Scientology Blue Building in LA, there's one called the, what is it, Mark? The Fellowship or the Self-Realization?
Self-Realization Fellowship, yeah. Self-Realization Fellowship. So basically that was started by a yogi, Pramanansa Yanda. Someone can look him up. He wrote a book called The Autobiography of a Yogi, which was very popular. Elvis actually read it. Elvis hated Scientologists, but he actually liked the Self-Realization Fellowship. And then if you remember an old actor back in the day named Dennis Weaver, who was McLeod back in the 70s, he was a lifelong member of the Self-Realization Fellowship, as was George
Really?
Harrison, even though
No
George
shit.
Harrison also was a Hare Krishna. But George
Really?
Harrison was given during the time that the Beatles got into their Indian mystic stuff in the
Mhm.
60s.
Yeah.
George Harrison. So there's actually a documentary now. It's from and sponsored and
Really?
paid by the Self-Realization Fellowship, but it's called
Of
Awake,
course.
and you can find it. And it talks about different people and the life of this Paramahansa Yanga, I think his name was. Please forgive me, I've just forgotten his name at the top of my head. But this book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, and what it really is it's sort of a mixture of Hinduism and Christianity. So I think that he was very smart because he melded the Hindu sort of mysticism, yoga, meditation part with the idea that Jesus could be accepted into the practice. He wrote a lot about Jesus, and they even
Of
have like
course.
services that are sort of church like. So it's kind of a hybrid between the two. And in Los Angeles, and specifically, and in Southern California, is where their headquarters are. So they have centers in Los Angeles County for sure. They have one in Pacific Palisades, then they have the one on
Wow.
Sunset, and then there's a large place in Ensenada, California, or Ensenadas, California, which is in San Diego. And basically, what they do there is, if you go to their centers, they have large
I gotta
gardens
fix this.
that are sort of they're guarded off by walls and stuff, and they're just large like meditation gardens that you can walk around. Anyone can go in them as long as they're open. And people just sit, they meditate, they just sort of enjoy the gardens, and of course they have bookstores. In that case, there is kind of that, they do sell stuff. Obviously, they sell books, they sell DVDs, they sell all kinds of stuff. They sell charms and whatnot, but it really is, if you think
Wow.
about like a
Wow.
meditation slash yoga center with Christianity, and and from what I gathered, it seemed to be the most benign of all these different groups that we'll talk about,
Mhm.
because they really, I would say, like, I haven't been a member, of course, and I know that people write about that, and who knows, I don't have any firsthand experience of that, but it does seem to be pretty benign and pretty mainstream as far as newer religions, or
Mhm.
groups that may not necessarily be destructive cults, but maybe they're more benign in some ways. And so that's definitely like one of them. But he focused on yoga, he focused on meditation, and that particular book you can find a lot. I have a copy. I bought it, when I was there. It was like $8 paperback. And this place in Ensenada is actually really nice. It's really big. It's on the ocean,
Wow.
and it's
Wow.
just really kind of, they're pretty nice. Again, I've never been a member, but things could change. But once you get involved, however, it seemed to be pretty okay from what I gathered, as
Mark,
just as a visitor.
how much time did you spend in there for that day? Like, did you just go in for a day, they show you the beautiful garden, or did you actually kinda go a little bit deeper?
No, for that particular one, I did a bunch of reading, of course. I read the
Mhm.
book, and then I went to the Pacific Palisades Center. That was, oh, was I alone? I know, okay. So the Pacific Palisades Center, they had something going on that particular day. This is when I was also just on vacation after 2011. They
Mhm.
had something going on there in the, I guess, the ceremony room, or the chapel, or whatever they would call it. And like they had like a service, and the service was pretty much just like people sitting. Part of it was meditating, part of it was like chanting, and then their service is, I don't even know how to really describe it, because it's a lot like a church service in some ways. They have a lot of photos of the different yogis. They also have photos of like Jesus and Krishna, and like, so they try to be very universalist, kind of new age,
Mhm.
where like, well, every path is the truth and all this kind of thing.
Right.
Um, I did go to the center in Toronto once for a service again, just sitting,
Really?
meditating, and doing, like, things like that, like, it seemed to be pretty much what you would expect from not really like a traditional Hindu service, because I've also been to those,
Mhm.
but more like, yeah, more like a sitting in a chair, you listen to someone speak, you do a couple minutes of meditation, someone will speak again, they might give reference, of course, to certain, like, um, sayings that the yogis talked about, and they talk a little
Mhm.
about the history of the group. I know that for a very long time, the Self-Realization Fellowship, the leader was a woman, and she was like one of the very few women religious leaders. So that was
Wow.
kind of
That's
interesting. She
interesting.
passed away
Yeah.
recently, but like, so they were kind of progressive in that sense, and they were a little bit hippie-ish, of course.
Mhm.
Um, but if you become a member, there is a course that you take, which is usually done online, and it is considered to be, you're not supposed to talk about what you're learning, although
Like
if
Fight
what you're
Club?
learning, yeah, I mean,
I
benign
mean,
ones,
what's up
yeah.
with that? Yeah,
In the
yeah, yeah.
sense that you're not supposed to share, but it's really just on how to meditate, and then after that you get
Mhm.
access to different things. But it didn't seem like a Scientology thing. It just seemed like this, they just they were just sharing their meditation techniques, which is kind of weird because again, it really should be secretive, but that was a little bit on the secretive side. And I did have a friend who did. I don't know if he joined necessarily, but he was really into self-realization. Maybe he joined, maybe he didn't. But as I said, it's mostly just this sort of a Hindu Christianity mixture, and it could change much like Scientology changes, but a lot of the groups that we're gonna mention, unlike Scientology, there wasn't any, like, hard sale pitch, or you know what I mean? Like, there wasn't, like, a hard sell pitch, they weren't following you to the ATM if you wanted to withdraw money, like, it was just they just seemed to be pretty relaxed. Now again, how if that changed, previously, maybe in the past they were different, but it just seemed like a really nice place just to go meditate,
It's
relax, if you're
it's
into that
gorgeous,
thing.
man. I mean, one of the
Yeah, it
things I
absolutely
noticed,
is. Yeah,
this is the one that it says, is
yeah.
this what it's called, Mark? Self-Realization Fellowship
Mhm.
Hall, so they have one in
Hollywood
Hollywood.
Temple.
It's such a LA religion, it sounds like. You get the hippie, you
Yeah,
mentioned
it's
the,
very
George
much.
Harrison connection.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
this is when
Dennis
mhm.
Weaver and
Oh, no
but
shit.
there's
He's a
that
member
one.
too?
eh, He was a member, Dennis Weaver. Yeah, he was. So he was self-realization until he passed away, which I think was just a few
No
years ago.
shit.
I can't remember exactly, 2010, 15-ish, whenever.
Mhm.
Um, Alison Brie, the actress who plays Annie on Community, her father was a member of that, so she's talked about the Self Realization Fellowship before, um, and like little things like here and there. But I would just say, yeah, essentially it's pretty benign. As far as the first encounter was, again, I want
Who
to
knows
always
how deep
preface
it
that.
goes though, yeah, right? Maybe if you would've
Exactly,
spent like
exactly.
anything, but maybe not. You
Yeah,
can only find out,
I don't know. I
that's
don't
very
know. Yeah,
interesting. I've always wondered what that frickin' building is, Mark, because it's gorgeous
yeah,
and, you could see
it's
into the
gorgeous.
beautiful garden, but it had
Yes.
a very new age I don't know
Mhm.
if it's a cult, bro, but I was just like, "Hey, man," I was into Scientology at the time, so I knew whatever, tech they had was clearly wrong. This is a great
Of
question by
course.
Alexander. Alexander's coming on
Yeah.
day after tomorrow, by the way, guys. You can check out his
Oh,
interview on
nice.
Chris Shelton that he did, and we're gonna,
Oh, cool.
he has a very interesting story to tell as well, and we'll probably hopefully pump out a couple interviews. 3 seems to be the magic number, by the way. Mark's been on twice, and then so is Marcus, and then we follow it up with a Q&A like this, which is really cool. Great question, Alexander. So I wanted to ask you the same thing before we went live. Were you skeptical or concerned when you first, went in, especially after just because you just finished your Scientology experience a year before, right?
Yeah, that's right. Less than a year.
Oh
Um,
shit, dude.
no, not
That's amazing.
honestly, yes and no. Because previously I had gone also to different religious organizations, although I had never really been into what you would call unorthodox or cultic ones or benign cults,
Hmm.
destructive cults, whatever. Um, like as far as world religion, let's call mainstream world religion groups, I had been to a number of times before Scientology. But I'm kind of like a fuck it, let's do it type of person. Like I don't know why. I always had my red flags going. So in some of these groups that we will mention, because self-realization is just the first one, I knew
Hmm.
it wasn't for me. You know, I went in, I whatever, like it was just wasn't for me. So okay, good enough. But there is a group that we can talk about after, which has a presence in Santa Monica, where I felt pressured to join, and yeah, I just decided like there's no way, and my flag, you know, my spidey sense tingled, and I just stopped, and I had no interest in going back because they were very pushy, and there was some things in there, even though it's not a Scientology group, it reminded me a little bit more of Scientology, and so I was, you know, the red flags kind of went off. So when I first encounter different groups, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt and then
Hmm.
listen to what they're saying and
Hmm.
then see if there's any red flags. And the red flags are just, again, are they pressuring you into something? Do you have to sign something? Or do you feel uncomfortable? And a lot of that came from post Scientology, especially
Okay. Yeah.
because, you know, had I had those red flags, you know, when I did my first um, introduction to Scientology, then it, you know, it would have been, I would have gone into Scientology. So that was kind of my thing. But I'm always willing to go to a service or an open house or something in different groups. I don't know why. I've always felt curious about those things, and I've just always been able to, you know, to go in first, give people the benefit of the doubt, and then if they say something or do something that reminds me of my past, then I can think, oh, okay, I don't think this is good, and you know, I do become skeptical, but skeptical is good. I always believe in a healthy skepticism. Just ask for evidence, ask questions. If they're
Yeah.
reacting negatively, they might be trying something to hide. I mentioned before that I have broadcasting and journalism background. So I've studied journalism, I've studied broadcasting, so I know the questions to ask now, especially. And you know, I know when someone is trying to hide something. I know when someone is blowing smoke up my ass. Like, you know, even though it didn't really work when I was in Scientology, I've gone back to relearn a lot of those things post
Mhm.
Scientology. And now, you know, when I'm approached by something, I was actually just on vacation in November. I was approached by Mormon missionaries,
No
and you know,
shit.
I just gave them the runaround and whatever. They were nice, they left, but you know, like I just asked a couple questions they didn't really like, so then they left and whatever. So yeah, I guess that's the sort of the long and the short of it is just I sort of know what to say now,
Hmm.
and I usually don't think to myself, well, it's not polite if you question, which is the culture I come from in Canada. I sort of
Right.
put that aside a little bit and just sort of ask the tough questions because I didn't in my previous experiences, basically.
Mark, were you
Yeah.
what about Judaism? You were born, wasn't that gonna be your religion, and why were you a seeker? Why
I
didn't you just stick with that? You know what I
Well,
mean?
I am Jewish, and
Mhm.
I go to a synagogue in the conservative movement, which is very mainstream, very mainline. There's nothing weird about conservative Judaism, although it's called
Mhm.
conservative. It's really weird. A lot of people freak out. But there's Orthodox, which are
Yeah.
conservatives. Then there's conservatives, which are mainline, and then there's
Mhm.
the Reform, which are liberal. But in America and in Canada, conservative Jews are actually very liberal, very progressive politically, just like any other place. Um, well, I don't know. Judaism's weird because I have okay, when you're born into Judaism because your mom is born Jewish,
Mhm.
and although my mom does have Jewish ancestry, we've never really been able to trace if it comes from her maternal side or her paternal side. So if it comes from her maternal side, then technically I would be Jewish by birth. But if it comes from her paternal side, then I'm not Jewish by birth. And so there's this just weird, you know, kind of thing in Judaism where you're born into it or you convert. And I
Mhm.
actually did start conversion a number of years ago, and I've been taking classes ever since for a long, long time to sort of fully convert. And
Mhm.
for me, as I get older, it's just more comfortable for me. I like it better, so therefore I'm in it now. I have personal reasons why why at the age of almost 40 I'm becoming more Jewish in a religious sense than
Mhm.
anything else, but none of it has to do with knowing 100% for sure that I have the one true faith or anything like that. It's not like
Mhm.
a fundamentalist dogmatic belief. It's just like, for me, I think if people are going to be religious, it's not objective, it's very subjective. Like there's an experience, there's a feeling, there's life experiences, things that happen to you in life which are personal. It's not objective, and that's totally fine. And I don't know, like, people believe in all types of things. I also spent years thinking that I was a secular humanist, and I was doing that thing, and that was not for me at all. Like that completely, I know that I'm not an atheist, I know that I'm not a humanist, and that's okay. Like, it's completely okay to say that. But I thought I was, and I tried breaking into that group, and I got kicked out of a bunch of them for questioning too much, because I wanted to ask questions. So I got kicked out of secular groups that ask certain questions. And so it was just weird. Like, people don't like people who think they think that they
Yeah.
know for sure. And so I'm just not into that,
Right.
whether it's religious or anti-religious fundamentalism. I'm just not into it. I don't care. I think that, live and let live. And, if you can't live and let live, that's totally fine. I get it. And I also believe very strongly that, government and religion should be completely separated. I don't like in the United States when religion, especially evangelical Christianity, is so intertwined with the government. I think that's disgusting. But I think a
Mhm.
lot of religious people agree with that too. Unfortunately, in America, religion is extremely toxic. And so,
Yeah.
in my opinion, the reaction to that breeds extremely toxic, sort of anti religious people. And when they get into a group, it's the same stuff. It's just groupthink all over again and all this
Yep.
kind of thing. So I discovered after 10 years that I wasn't, going to be involved in certain groups. And then 10 years after that, I wasn't going to be involved in other groups. And so, yeah, for me, for Judaism, it's who I am. And so I like it. I do it. I don't force people into it. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. Like, I don't even know what to say. It's just, I have a very live and let live attitude on that. I like the rituals.
Mhm.
I like the community aspect. Beyond that, it is what it is. I don't even know what to say. I'm just very, very relaxed and liberal about my beliefs. I don't think that, again, I don't think it's the one true faith or anything like this. So that's just me. But I
That's
think that's that
interesting.
that attitude. Yeah, the attitude of just being relaxed about the things that you believe in and being cool about it. Doesn't matter what the belief is. It's better than being dogmatic and wanting everyone to, be
Definitely.
the same thing.
Definitely. Which a lot of people can
Yeah.
be when it comes to religion, but not everybody. You make a good
Oh, of
point, man.
course, of course.
That's really cool, man. Because
Yeah, man.
well, I wanted to ask you this. Were you always kind of
Yeah.
a seeker, Mark? Were you, looking for something when you ran across Scientology? And then if so, did you buy into the spiritual aspect of Scientology? And did you feel a hole left in you when you left Scientology? And are you still seeking that? Did they implant that desire in you, or was that before you got into Scientology where you were already seeking?
No,
Or
I
were you
I was
seeking?
seeking. I was seeking
Mhm.
again because, because the whole, you have to be being Jewish by your mother's side. If not, you have to convert. When you're young, nobody cares about you. So if you want to convert when you're young, it's very difficult. Now that I'm getting older, it's much easier. Because of course, the idea being when you're younger, you somehow won't really, you're like, your commitments, you're sort of lumped into the big category of young people, and young people are just doing what's cool and whatever. Um, and for me, I went to different places because I wanted to feel like I belonged somewhere. And then when I
Mhm.
didn't feel that I belonged somewhere, I went to another place and another place. And I was very impulsive, and I wasn't giving like different kind of, you know what I mean? what do you call it? I wasn't really feeling comfortable, and I wasn't giving these particular groups, in my opinion, the benefit of the doubt. So I would go along with something, and I'd be so into it, and then something would happen, and then I just bail, and then I get
Mhm.
involved into something else, and then something would happen, and I would bail. And Scientology was the one that basically was so effing authoritarian that
Yeah.
when I wanted to bail, it was like, no, you can't. You got to come back on
Yep.
course. They give you gimmicks, which was another thing. A
Yeah.
couple weeks after I joined Scientology, I started ignoring the calls from the course supervisors. And
Mhm.
then they say, oh, come in. We have a free technical consultation, which is
Right.
bullshit. And you
Right.
can come in and this
Right.
and that. It's all going to be better. We're good. And then that was like the one group that was like, no, you have to come in. But all the other groups, you go and then you realize it's not for you because you don't fit in, and then I'd leave. So I was a very impulsive type person when I was younger. I didn't give, I didn't really sit with things very well, which is part of my ruin and why Scientology exploited that, and why if I was going
Mm,
to be a Scientologist, I was going to be a Scientologist to the end because of all the other groups that I didn't like and
I
whatever.
see.
So I
Wow,
don't know.
they played that against you, Mark? The fact that, "Hey,
Yeah,
you're
of
just a
course
leaver,
they
why
did.
don't you stick this one out? You're always bouncing."
Exactly.
That's a great point you
Yeah,
make, by the way, which I wanna point out is
yeah.
that a destructive cult will use your good qualities, against you, as
Yes.
you know. What's another one
Listen,
that
not
you,
everything
yeah,
well, not
sorry. Hey,
everything is for
guys, just so
people.
you know, so I don't get
Yeah.
accused of accidentally interrupting my guest, we really are on about a second and a half delay. At least I am on my end, so I'm not trying to interrupt him. I'm just trying to find the pacing to jump in. But please continue, man.
Well, again, as I've gotten older, I've just realized what is it that I want, and, again, it's a personal thing. I'm not trying to force anybody else into anything else, into any situation. And I'm that type of a person where, um, if you are religious or not religious, it doesn't matter. What matters is how you act. And so
Mhm,
there are plenty of liberal churches and mainline churches that people, sadly, a lot of people aren't raised in. So when a
mhm,
lot of people think of religion, if they're born into a very dogmatic, conservative type religion that's like anti-LGBTQ,
mhm,
treats women like second-class citizens, I get
mhm.
where they're coming from. And when they reject religion, they reject all religion based upon their religion at birth.
Yeah.
So I sympathize with people. But a couple groups that I discovered in Santa Monica, like the Unitarian Universalists, and there's a lot of liberal Christian churches. There's Reformed and Conservative Judaism, where like if you're transgendered or if you're gay or if you're lesbian, you can become a rabbi or a minister. You can be just as equal as anybody else. And the idea of going out and forcing people to your particular belief is just not part of it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the beliefs are true. I'm not making those claims, but at
Mhm,
least the culture is different. And I think people need to really understand that for every, and America is, again, the churches in America, especially in the South, are so incredibly toxic. And it's really, really sad. But there are some really amazing groups out there in all different religions that accept everyone. There are some churches that say all are welcome and they don't mean it, but there's a lot
yeah.
of churches
Scientology
in
says
different
that.
groups. Exactly. But there are a lot. I mean, there are tons,
Mhm.
especially growing up in Toronto. We have groups that like the United Church, the Anglican churches. They don't care who you are. It's sort of a come as you are, live and let live attitude, and that's what liberal religion is. And doesn't mean that liberal religion is 100% true. It doesn't mean nothing, but at least there's biblical criticism, which means that people don't take the Bible literally. They criticize it, they add academic scholarship to those claims, and it's good. So no one believes, for example, that the world is 6,000 years old or anything
Yeah,
like this.
that's
Like
crazy,
a
by
lot
the
of
way.
those toxic things that again are synonymous with more literalistic, fundamentalist,
Mhm. Right,
conservative religions. Not everything is like that. Again,
right.
that's a macro thing. In a micro
Mhm.
sense, as an individual, maybe nothing is for you, and that's totally cool too. So I sort of want to be both sides on this, because I recognize that for some people, no religion is going to be their thing, and that's totally okay. But just to understand that maybe the religion that you grew up with, perhaps, I don't know, there's a different interpretation that might be more for you or not. I don't know, but it's just worth to me. It's just worth looking into, and maybe people have. I don't know. So when I looked into it, for example, when I looked into different, more moderate approaches, I found one and went with it, and that's it. And now that I'm older, my idea of committing and my idea of working through some of the problems and not just abandoning issues is just better. So that's kind of how I put everything together.
Do you feel like you found your spiritual home, so to speak? Are you even looking for that? And in other words, where are you at today after all your adventures, including Scientology?
Well, for me at least, I have no idea whether or not, there's a God or not. I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't think anybody knows for sure. Um, but what I believe would be closest to something like deism, I guess. And I have a very mild belief, like there might be a God, but I don't necessarily think God cares who wins the Super Bowl. I don't really
Yeah,
think that
exactly.
God cares about, you know, um, who wins the presidential race. Like I don't
Right.
think that. I think if there is one, and there might not be one, so fine. But for me, if there's any kind of spirituality, I guess I'm more connected to history and nature and you know, uh, the past, I guess, and the fact that like being Jewish goes back thousands of years.
Hmm.
And, again, whether or not it's all true or not, that's not the claim. It's just that there's something interesting about rituals and traditions that span that many years.
Hmm.
And it's something that a community is based around. And then everything after that, as far as, praying, as far as like spirituality, that's a bit more personal because, I don't know 100%, but I do the rituals as much as I can. I try as hard as I can. I don't eat pork, for example, not because I think that some sky daddy is going to punish me if I do, but just because that's simply part of the law. And if I didn't like it, then I wouldn't do that. So I don't not afraid that something's going to happen if I do eat pork. It's just I just choose not to, and that to
Hmm.
me is much better than growing up in a situation where your parents instill in you
Yeah.
a fear of doing something because you think you're going to
Yeah.
be punished eternally. And again, this is all from coming from me becoming more religious as an adult, rather than being grown up in one, because I was not brought up religious at all, actually. My parents, I guess, were believers, kind of. My dad was not religious, but my mom, kind of. I don't know. So for me, it's complicated. I don't have all the answers. But like, what can you
You mean
say?
you're an ex-Scientologist. You should have answers, bro.
I
That's
know I
what they
should have.
promised.
Ron is
We need
the
to get you
source.
back on
But
chorus and find your misunderstood word, Mark, because that's
uh,
the only reason someone
as
blows,
far
as
as
you
far
know.
as as far as spirituality is concerned, I don't think it's esoteric. Like everyone has, if you want to meditate, if you want to do yoga, if you want to do anything, I always go back to the same rule, which is if it helps you and it works for you, then that's great. It doesn't for everybody, so that's okay. Some people don't like meditating. I like meditating. Some people don't like praying. I don't mind praying. Some people, I don't know, like some people like doing things subjectively and some people don't. I think that you have to figure out what is for you, because what is for you is based on your personal experiences, and there could be things that just turn people away because of how they grew up. So if how you grew up was in a very, very toxic household where you were forced to go to church on Sunday, you were forced to have fear, you were forced to confess all your sins, then you know what, maybe as an adult, maybe being in a community of atheists and not doing anything spiritual is better for you, and that's totally
Yeah.
okay too. But for some people it's just different, and for some people it isn't. And again, I look at the world not objectively but subjectively, because as human beings we have our own experiences, and this is how we learn.
Yeah.
And I can't really say to anyone else that your experiences are less valid or more valid than mine. I can just tell you what my experiences, are and were, and hopefully maybe it helps people. But I like to say, just try something. If you're really really interested in something, like if you're thinking, "Holy crap, I should have done meditation years ago. I really want to try it." Just try it. And you know what? If you can't do it, there's no, like, don't feel bad, And I think that's another thing, that people feel that they have to do these things because they will get benefits. But the benefit from spirituality is when it isn't a chore. So if it is a chore going to church, and if it is a chore, praying on your knees 3 times a day, if it is a chore meditating, then that means that's not for you, and that's totally fine as well.
Now, what's your reaction when you hear something like this we're talking about the crushing certainty, where Jen says there's
Yeah.
only one way to God, only one way? That immediately triggers a Scientology thing. Salvation through Jesus Christ. How do you respond to statements like that?
Listen, if that point of view is correct, then I'm going to be burning in hell.
Me too.
But yeah, and so is 70+% of the world. So if that's the case, have to remember that a lot of people don't really understand this, but God in Christianity and God in Judaism are different. God in
Mhm.
Judaism does not have a body, and may or may not hear our prayers, and really doesn't care whether or not we're eating pork. Whereas in Christianity, God is personal. God usually has a body and is made up of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So if Christianity is true, then if that particular form of Christianity is true, I'd rather be in hell, because I don't really want to be part of that God. I would rather be away from that
Yeah.
God. I don't think that what I believe in is 100% true. So whatever. Or maybe we'll reincarnate. Maybe we won't. Maybe there'll be nothing. Maybe there'll be something. I don't know. I don't really care. I just know that one way is never the correct way. And if it's, again, fundamentalist religion
Yeah.
or fundamentalist anti-religion, it's just, that doesn't work in our world today. We live in such a massive pluralistic world full of different
Mhm.
cultures and different beliefs, and each one of them, I think, contributes to something. So if someone is fixated on the one quote unquote truth, and they're trying to make it subject, or trying to make it objective, but it is a subjectiveness, then you're already kind of lost, because you can say I feel, or I have faith. It's my feelings, it's my experience, but you can't say it objectively true. It's just not the case. Anyway.
Well said, man. And by the way, it's a perfect
Yeah.
time to plug the Discord. Just to let you guys know,
Mhm. Yeah, I'll come
Angela,
on there.
yeah, please do. And anybody, we finally have it set up. Angela was kind enough to bust her ass. I'm still getting used to Discord, but she really busted her ass to set that up and make it a platform. I think you got like 10 people over there so far, but it's officially up. The link is in the description box of this video and Alexander's upcoming video. So please join us over there. I don't know how well that will go or not, but I'd love to create a community where you guys can ex-JWs, ex-cult members, or you don't even have to be an ex-cult member, just a place where people can land, hash it out, heal, talk amongst themselves. And then also, as I'm getting to know Discord, are you on there, Mark?
I
You
will
you
be,
a
actually.
Discord guy?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it'd be really nice. I
The
can go in if people want to
possibilities
ask me
seem
questions or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the possibilities seem endless. I don't know if we get
Yeah.
copyright strike, but somebody had the idea to do a night where we can all get stoned and or not, and drink and watch Battlefield Earth, have a watch party over there.
Oh my
We can
yes, yes,
yeah,
yes,
right?
yes.
Fucking A.
Amen to that.
I don't know if we could do that
Let's
without
get that going.
copyright, but I think there might be a way around it. But yeah, we could possibly have a once a week or whatever where we all hook up and just chat. It seems like it could be a good thing. Thanks for plugging that, Marcus. I
Yeah, I
forgot
think
about
so.
that.
Yeah,
All right.
so my whole thing is, I don't know. You probably don't either, but who cares? We're
No.
we're here for
You
such a
know,
short period of time. And, like,
it's
why
true.
why fight? It doesn't matter what you're fighting about. Why fight? Who cares? Just live and let live. If someone
Thanks,
can't,
Alexander. You know what my whole
then
take on it so
live. If you're comfortable
far is, Mark?
in what you believe in,
I mean, Scientology, as you know, sells certainty, right? So, Did you freeze on me, or are you still there? Mark, I lost you? Oh, he cut out. Okay, guys, I'm sure he'll come back, shortly. But just to carry on, what happened I don't like Mark, I don't claim to know the answers on anything, but, my whole process Scientology sells certainty, which means you have to know the answers, you can never doubt yourself, and it really seemed like they did have a technology, a science of the mind, where we didn't have to have faith, we didn't have to believe in Jesus or any God. In fact, as you guys know that have been deep diving on the channel, it's actually a, satanic religion where you are God. There's really actually no such thing as God in Scientology. You become your own God, which to me is a total inversion of anything kind of that grounds you in reality or maybe keeps your ego in check. Okay, here comes Mark.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem, bro.
Just my
Don't you
connection.
ever do that again, Mark, or I'm sending you to ethics. In fact, I already halfway through the KR here. Unacceptable, sir. No. But anyways, just
I'll
finishing
do
up,
my
guys, real
80s.
quick. My whole process, what I've been working on, is simply deprogramming, not just from Scientology, but the
Sure.
world we live in. We're bombarded from the time we pop out of the womb with our parents' ideas. The education system, I consider more or less a brainwashing. You get the state's version of everything. And then you've got the TV and your friend, bombard, like the amount of propaganda and mind control in this world is actually astounding if you just stand back and look at it. So my whole theory was, as kids, our minds are wide open. We're kind of in download mode, apparently, according to psychologists, from 0 to 6. So that's like the imprint. And so whatever our parents, whatever their blind spots were, they're not trying to be malevolent necessarily. They just might pass on their religious beliefs. They might be abusive and pass on their trauma because they didn't heal it, etc. So my whole process towards finding out who I am is figuring that we're already that we're kind of in a natural state, maybe when we pop out of the womb, and then the society and the programming just jumps on you. So my whole theory has been to simply undo the programming, and at the core of that, you actually just find out who you really are, which is kind of how you started out before you entered the machine, as Pink Floyd says. It's just totally my own take on it, by the way. I haven't been looking for any kind of belief system to replace Scientology. I've gone into, we'll talk about that in season 3 of the deprogramming. I don't claim to have the answers. I'm constantly searching or whatever, but I did hit a point where I do feel like I kind of know who I am. And it was just simply a matter of removing everything that wasn't true. Deprogramming, as I call it. Have you gone through that too, Mark? Like, did you learn a lot from, well, did you read any books about coercive control? Did you happen to read Steve Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control? What did you do to figure out that Scientology was even something bad, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how were you able to suss your experience with Scientology? How did you deprogram, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a ton of videos when I left on with former members. So I watched as much as I could, and then I read books. I actually did a lot of read a lot of books on religious studies, comparative religious studies, academic work, because I read books on the history of religion, the history of God, psychology, neuroscience. I read books that were, anti supernatural. Like I read Carl Sagan, everybody does. And I sort of just, what I got out of it is that regardless of whether or not, again, religion is objectively true, or which one is objectively true over the other, but there's just something about the human experience that people don't know. We don't have the answers, and so there are people that do exploit that, like Scientology, and then there's people who don't, and there's a lot of people who exploit that. I'm not, again, I'm not going to say that there isn't, but there are a lot of people who exploit others because people are looking for the answers and they want to know. And so one of the most helpful things, two helpful sayings, I think they're proverbs that I like, which is, there are many paths up the mountain, but the view from the top is the same. That's a Japanese proverb.
That's a cool
And
phrase,
then
man.
the idea, the idea of, don't be weary of those who seek the truth, be wary of those who think they found it.
That's
And
a great quote too, dude. I like that one.
those were, yeah, and
Yeah,
those were the
exactly,
ones, like,
bro.
nobody knows. what the hell is going on, and we compare. We say, well, I believe X because Y is so stupid. Okay, that's cool, but you still don't know, and it's okay not to know. And as I said, that's the whole thing for me is not knowing, right? It's just feeling
Yeah,
around
uncertainty. I love
and
uncertainty now. I
yeah,
love the quest is forever. Look, I mean, with all the knowledge there
yeah,
is to know in the universe, we're never going to
yeah.
suss it during a single lifetime. So you always got to keep your
No,
running
no,
shoes
no.
on, your track shoes on, and run to the next
Yeah,
perception. That's why, Mark,
and
anytime anybody says, like, I'm not harping on that gal earlier, but to simply say Jesus is the way, period, end of story, it's like there's a plethora of
okay,
knowledge that's probably available that you haven't looked at yet because that's
yeah,
it can't be that simple. I don't believe in that. And it's not just because
I
of my
agree.
Scientology experience, it's just what Mark said. But also, I'm not claiming that Christianity is the same as Scientology. They're not. We make the distinction.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
nonetheless, I do see that crushing certainty in fundamentalist believers, and it's like there
yeah,
might be more to know yeah, but it also can provide a comfort. And what do they say? Religion is the simulacra, not the simulacra, the opiate of the masses. So there it was when I was in
Karl Marx, yeah.
Scientology, knowing that I had the answers, Mark, I felt amazing. And I got to tell you, it felt comforting, powerful, and it was like a hypnotic high that I was constantly in,
Yeah, of
walking around every day knowing the
course.
answers. It feels fucking amazing. So
Yeah,
letting that certainty go, as you know, it's
yeah.
horrible. But that's when the
It,
real
it's
adventure begins, in my
it's
opinion.
emptying. Yeah, no, I agree. It's very emptying because you're absolutely correct. You go from knowing everything to knowing nothing, and then
Yeah,
just
exactly.
looking at what you think you know. Like, okay, so um I look at I looked at knowing from a Scientology perspective, right?
Mhm.
Um, which is knowing that something is true simply because you've observed it to be true, which is sounds nice, but there's different kinds of truth. Like there's all different kinds. There's again the truth that we get from looking into the universe, like empirical truths, and then there's truth that we get from experience. And we have to have both, or else if we have one over the other, like if we only have empirical truth, we don't have there's nothing behind that. So there's nothing, so it's too cold for people. And if we just have our experiences, then it's like postmodern stuff where there is no truth and it's just your perspective. But that's not true at all, because there's also a universe out there that does have the laws of physics. So for me, what's been the most, I guess you could say, I don't want to say comforting, but the most knowledge based is just knowing that like it's okay to have conflicting truths. It's
Yeah,
okay to look at different sources
yeah.
and pick out what is true, because it's not always all going to be true, but what can be true about it. So if I look at all these different groups that we're going to talk about today, they're not 100% true, but they add something to the story because first of all they exist. So that means that some people agree with it and it works for some people. So what does that tell us about us as a people?
Mhm,
And I don't necessarily know what the answer is. Like I don't know, like we know why people get into Scientology.
mhm.
Um, they get in it for unhealthy reasons, or they're brought up by unhealthy people,
And
toxic
many and
people
various
because of a
reasons, because
certain truth.
it'll depend on, what that
Exactly.
person's unique
But
experience
it
is.
eventually blurs that line between what is objective and what is subjective. And I just think that there's both. Like I'm looking at the world now and thinking, okay, what did Scientology say and do to me? Like what did it bring? And when we look at the negative stuff, that actually is that's actually like the truth of Scientology is that it's a scam, that people will fall for
Definitely.
it, but then when they get out of it, they do become better people, and that they will take the knowledge that they have and then they will maybe speak out or whatever. So to me, it's like finding a silver lining. It's like, what is the truth about Scientology? The truth about Scientology is that it's extremely dangerous, and it's actually good for people to know about Scientology and to know about what Scientology does for people in a negative sense, because then we can build people to be more skeptical of those types of groups. So in the future, they will not fall for them.
Exactly.
And it's
Well
also
said.
really good that they're kind of losing members, and they don't. I mean, they have a lot of money, but they don't have a lot of members. They're not getting new members, so that's really good too. You know what I mean? So there's even though Scientology existing can be negative, and they do really bad things that people should be angry about, it's also not terrible in the sense that, you know, they do exist because they're really not successful. You know, like groups that are like Scientology are not successful. And
That's
look at
true.
their public image right now. So
Mhm.
we don't have
I
any
know.
control over whether or not they're going to go away tomorrow or the next day or in 10 years or in 100 years. But at least we know that they're toxic, and at least their actions are speaking louder. So for me, I don't know. It's conflicting truths just means pluralism. Pluralism, I told Chris Shelton this, is something that I've learned a lot about
Mhm.
from a philosophy standpoint. It's okay to think it's okay to have more than one conflicting truth. Some people don't agree with it. Again, please understand that's totally fine. But you know that we live in such a complicated world and such a crazy world that I don't know. I don't know. I have no definite answers anymore because of my experience with Scientology. I can only tell you multiple
We
sides of an issue now. I can't just
we
say,
just gotta
okay, this
clear
is it, you
yeah,
know?
we just gotta clear your word, Mark. You know, according to Scientology, the
Oh
only
God.
reason Mark would have left is because he didn't
Oh,
understand something. Mark, you wanna hear
oh
a
God.
story about this is the part that kinda breaks my heart the most with my family. Not that they're
Yeah,
Scientologists and not even necessarily that we can't see each other on Christmas or whatever.
yeah,
It's the fact that I know that they see me as a suppressive person, and I know how
yeah,
they see me because I used to be a Scientologist, so I know the veracity of that opinion. So, according to them, when I last talked to them, I don't know how many years ago, and I'm sure they still hold this belief because Scientology
yeah.
whispers in their ear, "What's wrong with Doug?" So, I attested to past life clear. I did the grades up to grade
Oh, okay.
4. I skipped Ned. I bullshitted my way through clear by saying I'm a past life clear because I really believed it. I went through their little clear
Yeah,
certainty rundown. And then I went up the OT levels and I was having problems on OT2 and specifically OT3 where I went nuts.
yeah,
And according to my parents, this is after being years out, showing them Steve Hassan's book when I had the chance, trying to
yeah.
tell them that L. Ron Hubbard was a liar, using all the evidence, which, by the way, doesn't work, friends. When people are quote unquote brainwashed, evidence is not going to do the trick.
No,
But I was naive at the time. So, what they told me, Mark, even years after I'd been out, they knew my viewpoints that I wasn't going to be a Scientologist. They said, they kept trying to convince me because the DFP, that's the director of processing, that's the person who handles my case and everybody else's cases and would be able to look in the folders, which they keep on every, I don't want to throw people off with the words, we're called the pre-clear when we're receiving auditing. And then the DFP is a director of processing who goes through the folders. They're the ones that are feeding my parents the information that Doug is only speaking out against Scientology and has gone the crooked way he has. Because remember, we know as Scientologists, we have the answers, just as convinced as some of these other
mm-hmm.
people are that they have the answers. So according
Yeah,
to the DFP, Doug simply left because he falsely attested to past life clear. So we need to get him to go back and do Ned. And then that's why he went crazy and he had a nervous breakdown outside of AOLA, their building in Los Angeles, etc. There was no explaining to him that we were in a dangerous mind control cult. It's if you
yeah,
only have it's like the program got there first, I say. So when you try
yeah,
to talk to somebody that has a specific certainty and their conviction and their belief, it's like a filter
mhm,
where they're not actually hearing what you're saying. They already got the download from Hubbard or whoever, and then they can only
yeah,
think within that. So my parents aren't hearing what I'm saying about, hey, here's the bite
no,
model, here's how cults work. They're not hearing any of that.
no,
The program, the triggering is saying, like a Dell that computer, Doug needs to go back because he did a misunderstood word. It's like, it's so crazy. It's literally like a freaking program. Which
yeah.
if you guys have any tips on how to
Which
break it with people, I'd love to know because you
I
can't,
do.
please.
I do like Steve Hassan. So Steve Hassan will
Hmm.
say, when you talk about the word cult comes from the word culture. So all of us are in a cult. Okay, doesn't matter what it is.
Hmm.
The
That's a great
difference,
point.
though, is it constructive, benign, or destructive? So if it's
Exactly. Great
constructive,
point.
right? So if it's destructive, so I'm in the Star Trek cult. I love Star Trek. Star Trek is my life. It has been since I was 4 years old. I've
Yeah, but
watched
it's not a
all the TV
destructive
shows.
cult.
I've gone to
Yeah,
conventions. I've, done all these kinds of stuff. It's constructive because I have friends who are, then there's the destructive cults. Okay, that's Scientology and some of these groups. And then there's just a lot of benign stuff where it's neither destructive or constructive. That's the major thing. If it is destructive,
exactly.
then you've got the bite model, you've got isolation, you've got all these kinds of violent behavior, committing fraud. That's the whole thing. I mean, we
Hmm.
literally all have culture. Some people are
Exactly.
obsessed with knitting and obsessed with sewing. They're obsessed with going to the gym.
Yeah,
Okay,
but there's
you can
nothing
take
wrong with
that too
that.
far,
Yeah.
but you can't
Y-
take it too far. If you're in a gym where, your
Good point.
trainers are telling you that this is the only gym in town that you can, lose weight or gain muscle, and people like
Hmm.
CrossFit and all this kind of stuff. Like there
Yeah, that
are
can be considered a cult.
gyms,
A dis-
there
Destructive.
are all kinds. So it's not just religion, of course, it's also politics. We have North Korea. We've
Hmm.
had, all
Which is very
kinds of
similar to
Nazi Germany.
Scientology.
Those,
Hmm.
again, exactly. There's political cults, business cults. There's, social cults. There's secular cults. There's religious cults. There's all kinds of cults out there. But it just depends on this spectrum of whether or not the behavior is constructive, benign, or destructive. So for me, it's the destructive side, right? That's the part of it. And I do think the bite model is actually, knowing
It's
what the bite
just
model was
it's
definitely an epiphany. Definitely an
when did
epiphany
when
for
did you
me.
come across that, Mark? When did you come across that book specifically? And by the way, audience, we're referring to a book that I ramble on about
Yeah.
all the time called Combating Cult Mind Control, since that's the book that
Yeah.
was literally dropped on my doorstep that made me from a Kool-Aid drinking hypnotized Scientologist one day to literally completely free, but having to deal with 10 years of CPTSD after that, reading that
Hmm.
fucking book. That's how powerful that fucking shit was. When did you
Well,
kind of
it
come
was
across it,
shortly
Mark?
after.
Hmm.
Shortly after. I mean, by at least 2011, 12, 13. So maybe 10 years ago, maybe roughly around 10 years, let's say.
So you had been
And
out 8, 9,
freedom.
10, for 5 years. You've been
Yeah,
out
I've
for
been out
5
for a
years,
few years.
Mark.
Yeah.
Did you get
Yeah.
anything right away that helped you to understand Scientology? Or this is a great point you bring up, because a lot of people will leave the cult and
Yeah.
it takes them 10 years later before they realize what actually
Yeah.
happened to them. That's why I felt so happy that I got that knowledge right away. So I didn't have to go the indie Scientology. I didn't
Yeah.
question, well, maybe Hubbard got it right, but Miscavige fucked it up. No, dude, I was out immediately.
Yeah. Same with me.
Any sort of
So
knowledge right away, Mark? In
the
2008,
first
2009-ish?
the first thing that I did, we talked about him last time, was Jason Begay, because he's a great character actor.
Mm,
So
he's a great character
his
actor.
2 hour, 2.5 hour
It's a
interview with
great
Mark Bunker,
video.
Tori Christman, that was like the first unraveling for me, and that was very shortly. That was within a month, maybe 2 months of me leaving. I think he did that in early 2008. I must have seen it probably
Right.
by the summer of '08. And so that was the first unraveling. Then, you go down these spirals and you get susceptible to all kinds of things. But probably was actually with Steve Hassan and that, I would say at least by 2013. So maybe before, I just can't remember, but at least by 2013, 2014, I knew who Steve Hassan was, and what the bite model was. So it could have been 2011, it could have been something like that, but it was probably after I left Los Angeles, most likely. And then also there's a woman. She's in Los Angeles. She's a cult therapist named Rachel Bernstein,
I do know who that
and
is.
she's amazing. Yeah, if I was in Los Angeles, I'd see her, like, for therapy, because she understand. And I actually did go to see her one time for a group therapy session, which was excellent. She has an office in the Valley. I think it was 2016, 17. I can't remember now, because since 2011, I've been back and forth to Los Angeles many times. So it
Mhm.
was sometime in 2015, 16, 17. And yeah, it was like a 1 hour group therapy, or two hours, and that was awesome. So she's been very helpful too, because if I have a question, I'm Canadian, so I don't want to bother people. That's our whole thing. But
That's
if I have a
funny.
question or something along the way, I'll ask her. She's been very, very helpful. Um, but so between like just knowing that there are actually therapists out there who know that, Chris, of course. Chris Shelton now has his
Mm-hmm.
master's in psychology and
Mm-hmm.
coercive control. So we've had this, conversations. Of course, this is all after the fact. Now I'm in my 30s. But I would say, like, yeah, for me, I think Steve Hassett would have been the first non-Scientologist professional, mental health professional that was able to at least put something together, the bite model. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I know that I read his book. I can't remember if I have might have a copy of it at, home, or at, my other home.
Oh, I should have put that near me so I could show
But
people.
like,
Yeah.
but anyway, it's fantastic. Again, it's a great book, and that to me is the thing. It's like what he's describing is when it becomes destructive. So when things
Mm-hmm.
become
Such a key
destructive,
point.
then self-isolation, group isolation, of being afraid of going online, being afraid of using Google, being afraid to have real conversations,
I
being
know, bro.
afraid,
I know, man.
fear, so much fear,
Phobias.
just and then
That's
the
another
information
thing.
control,
Yep.
phobia. Yeah.
Phobias.
Oh my God.
Phobia. And by the way, guys, like
Ugh.
it was, I don't know what your guys' knowledge on this stuff is, but I didn't know anything. I just studied Scientology for most of my life. So when he takes very complex or maybe misunderstood subjects like hypnotism, phobia installation,
Yeah.
behavior, information, thought, and emotion control, these really like they're really easy to understand concepts. They can completely open
Yeah.
up your mind. And yet we're simply not taught this information because I think
Mhm.
we would start sussing the very education system that we send our kids to. Yeah, we should chat and preview Jason Begay video. In fact, guys, I'll just play a little bit of it because
Yeah.
it's so Mark, you're
I
saying
would
this
love
was
to
like
do
the
that on
first thing.
Discord. That'd be
We
great.
should do that. Now that we can do
Yeah.
without copyright problems, but just like you,
Yes. Yeah.
Mark,
No,
I
Mark
fucking
Bunker's not going to copyright strike you.
mm-mm. Mark's really,
No, he
really
won't.
fucking cool, by the way. I
He's
love
a good
that guy.
guy.
He
He's a very
walks
good guy.
such a
Yeah.
fine line of he's not an
Yeah.
ex-Scientologist. He's
That's right.
he's not the mayor of Clearwater. He's on the board,
He's on the
right?
city council. He's on the
Yeah,
city council. Yeah.
and he does such a like there's someone to learn from because he
Yeah.
walks this incredible fine line. He has a lot of empathy for these people. He doesn't walk around calling them a bunch
Yeah.
of brainwashed idiots. He has a lot of
Nope.
compassion, man. And the way he
Yeah.
handles them and interacts with them over the years has just been fantastic,
Mhm.
man. I
Yeah,
really
and
like
I've
that
met
guy's
him at a
style.
number of I met him at a number of protests back in '09
Mhm.
and 10, and he was always really nice to me. He actually my very first interview as an ex-Scientologist, you can go back. I was using the name Alex M, and it was from 13, almost 14 years ago now. Actually, it was February of
Wow.
2009, and we
Wow.
did an interview in front of OSHO on L. Ron Hubbard Way, and I was nervous as hell, and I was wearing a mask, but you could tell it was me. But I had just
Oh,
been in
no
Los
shit.
Angeles for 2 or 3 weeks, and I was scared that they were gonna kick me out of the country if they found out who
Yeah.
it was just nonsense. But you can go back to see a 26-year-old, Mark Turi, scared and talking about my experiences with him. So if you wanna do that,
Oh,
it's up there. Alex M. interview with
I
Mark
think
Bunker from February of
I will
'09.
definitely check that out, my man. I remember
We
you
can do
telling me
that on
about that. Did
Discord
I?
too, and
Hey,
I can
absolutely.
face
We can
palm and say,
once we get guys, go over to Discord, please. The link is in the description. And once you go to the Discord, you're looking for Dazed but
yeah.
not confused. Exactly like it is on the channel. And hey, what's up,
I was
Scientology?
just so
It's good to
nervous.
see you. I did interview Tony Ortega, and hopefully we can get him back. He gave an excellent interview during the Danny Masterson trial, which you can find on the channel. So check that out. But yeah, Tony's been killing it too in terms of reporting and everything. God bless that guy. God, there was something I wanted to go back to. Okay, so let's play a little bit of this. I just want to show you this Jason Begay interview, and like maybe we can kick it around on Discord because I remember, Mark, I got out in January 2008. This not very nice guy. It's a long story, but let's just say I really appreciate the guy dropping the book off, even though it might not have been the best of intentions. And then shortly after
Yeah.
that, because this was in 2008 when Begay, put out this video, and I was just like stunned. And it's amazing because you can see him like
It is.
deprogramming as he's talking. Let's just watch like just the very beginning, so you guys, if you don't know what we're talking about, you can get an idea. This is Jason waking up. And he just started speaking out right away. And Tori Magoo and Mark Bunker are here interviewing him. And it's amazing to see him still programmed and unpacking the journey, you
It
know?
would be probably useful for me to kind of go through this thing because I'm still trying to discover what happened. I feel still a little lost and bewildered, and I don't quite get it. And that's a common thing for me in my life is that I like some things. I mean, just politically, like I can't get how people don't see that politician's a liar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't get it. And so for me, if I was going to write something, the concept of the title would be how I got into Scientology and why I got out. As a little kid, I'm talking about even before I could talk, I can remember being interested in people. Really?
Okay, and this is where he gets into it, but I'll leave a link, by
Yeah.
the way, in the description box if you guys want to check that out because it's definitely worth watching. Mind blowing. And that took a lot of nutsack on that guy because a lot of people like Laura Prepon, I was going to say I'm not going to name names, but no, they do need to be named because Laura Prepon and Jason Lee and these people that leave, they have a huge opportunity to speak out. And Jason, you know, didn't give a fuck about jeopardizing his career. It only went up since then. So, you know, kudos on him for having the balls before. That was before Paul Haggis and everybody else, man. That was one of the first celebrities that really came out with guns a-blazing, you know. And by the way, GJ, it's really good to see you again, man. I've missed you. I've noticed you in the chat. Just wanted to say that because it keeps passing up here in the text. Also, another thing that popped up is someone mentioned OSHO way back in the chat. Do you know anything about OSHO, Mark? This
Yeah, you know, I saw that documentary, Wild Wild
Wild
Country.
Country.
Yeah, where they take over the town in Oregon. It's fantastic. And yes, that's another that's not like self-realization. Again, that is definitely this guy who was that's a destructive cult because
Absolutely.
you know,
But
he's
you know
involved
what
in
though?
so
This is a
many,
great
yeah,
one to bring up, Mark, because a lot of people
yeah,
don't know that. It's
yeah.
definitely a destructive cult, and it's
It
weird
was
because even with
100%.
100%, but even with
Yeah.
Wild Wild Country being out there on Netflix, there's a lot of people that follow that guy, and he says a lot of things like L. Ron Hubbard, which
Yeah.
sound like it's not a cult. Like a lot of people are into this guy, is what I'm saying, but it's
Oh,
definitely,
yes.
definitely a destructive cult. Let's
Yeah,
take a quick look
absolutely.
at this one too, in case you guys aren't familiar with it.
It's a great
Consider this,
series. Highly
it's
recommended.
an amazing series. Me as well, man.
Yeah.
Definitely. And if there's any doubt that Osho is a cult leader, that will be subsumed
Plug one.
real
Plug one.
quickly. Here's just a little bit of it, guys.
Everybody felt they were there at the beginning of the great experiment. Like we were the chosen people.
I'm here in one of the largest ranches in the Northwest.
Yeah.
Today, it's Rajneeshpuram because a prominent Indian guru and his followers bought it.
Our vision was to create a community
Based on compassion and sharing.
Of course. That's how it all starts, right, Mark?
Was simply to
Oh, yeah.
raise the consciousness of humanity. That was his goal.
America was land of promise. It was my conviction we will have no problems.
I don't think America has a place for these people.
Everyone in Antelope mistrusts Rajneesh.
I want that guru and his evil influence out of my city.
They're run by satanic power.
There is talk of vigilantes who may seek revenge on the Rajneeshis.
A bomb went off in the middle of the community.
More than 60 followers evacuated.
It was a catastrophe.
Mostly I'm just terrified.
If I didn't take measures to protect our community, no one else would do it.
We call upon the governor to disarm this cult's army now. If the government does decide to get you, they're going to get you.
Who would poison a whole town?
The Rajneeshis set a stage for a big outbreak to influence the election.
They had no evidence.
They were facing immigration fraud, smuggling.
The Rajneeshis came this close to murdering a presidential appointee.
There is bias, there is prejudgment, religious discrimination, and this is democracy. I've had enough of it.
We were going to mount a full-scale assault.
We will be ready to protect ourselves.
I'd grown up understanding thou shalt not kill. What had happened?
There's darkness in all of us.
Days coming.
Doesn't make you a bad person.
Yeah,
That's an
it's
amazing,
incredible. Again,
yeah, it's mind
and
bending.
he was the one who was driving around in Rolls Royces,
Exactly.
and
That's
all
another
of
red
his
flag.
and his and all of his followers were picking beans or whatever, corn on a farm, and they were doing grueling work. And yeah, he was in a Rolls Royce, and he had multiple. I can't remember how many Rolls Royces he had, 50 or something, like some crazy number.
Yes,
It was insane.
While
Yeah.
his followers, of course, are in poverty. That's another red flag, guys. If the leader is really rich and all of his
Yep.
followers are just there, poor and supporting the cause, that's probably a destructive cult just based on that.
Absolutely, yeah.
What are
But there's another one
speaking?
that came from
Mhm.
India.
Yeah, that's a thing that Marcus and me were talking about recently, where um, Scientology and the one that you mentioned earlier, the Fellowship, whatever, and so many of them, Mark,
Self-realization.
they are under the guise of let's take the Eastern philosophies. That's supposed to be where all
Yeah.
the wisdom and everything comes from, and let's Westernize it. Hence
Mhm.
Scientology, OSHO, the Beatles, got sucked in. It was
Mhm.
especially in the 50s and 60s, man. That was when they really kicked off the New Age cults. And
Yes.
under the guise of self-help, it's actually, they just exploded out of everywhere, and it was all based on the fact that this is simply wisdom from the East translated so that the West and the rest of the world can enjoy it. And then you get people like what you just saw with OSHA with guns and shit. By the way, I just put up this documentary by A&E that strings together. It's from 2018, and it strings
Right.
together 7 of the more popular cults. 12 tribes is in there, which a guy named Reckless Ben, by the way, has a whole series on, which is worth checking out. He also did a Scientology series. And I just edited them all together to show if someone just sits down and watches it from the beginning till the end. It starts with Nexium, then it goes into Children of God, and then at the end,
Mm.
episode 7 is Jehovah's Witnesses. You can see, Mark, that all of them, it's like 5 hours long, and by the end of it, I'm going, dude, these all operate the same way. They use the same tool
Yeah.
book, the same playbook. They're all run by a narcissist/sociopath.
Mhm.
There really is nothing new under the sun. And once you learn how to spot it, Mark, it would be I'm a little sketchy to say this because I don't want to, have overconfidence, but I do feel like I've gotten enough information and learning experience from Scientology where I do feel like it would be
Mhm.
impossible for me to fall into a cult again. People
I
that
would
say
hope
that
not.
would never
Yeah.
happen to me,
Me
though, I
too.
would also never say
Yeah.
that would never happen to me. A, because it did happen to me, but B, because as you said, the world itself is a cult-ure. So we're all born into the big cult, and then I felt like I was 2 worlds back. So I just deprogrammed from Scientology as step 1,
Mhm.
and then I didn't immediately go back to the normie world. I used what I learned from Scientology to question everything I was being told by government, etc. Somebody here mentioned
Mhm.
that government's a cult. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any bigger cult. Who's been telling us what to do recently? And if we go against them, they censor us. And I mean, it's just straight out of like Orwell's 1984. So just from my
Mhm.
perspective, we're all born in, I was 2 worlds back as I describe it. Just getting back to the WOG world, I hate to use that word, but you know what I mean by it. That's Hubbard's word
Yeah.
for you
Mhm.
guys, everybody that's not a Scientologist. So coming back from Scientology, which was really unloving and uncaring, into the normal world, it was amazing the help that normal people would give me, and just the care was so different than Scientology. But I also sussed that there seemed that wasn't necessarily the perfect world either, the normal world. So, bro, I fucking learned how to question goddamn everything since coming out of
Yeah.
Scientology. So I don't believe shit unless there's evidence to back it up. I don't just believe it because it's on the TV or what I'm told. But if I didn't go through the Scientology experience, Mark, this is why I'm thankful. And maybe you'd say the same thing, that you maybe got something out of it, a learning experience, because it's certainly
It's a learning experience.
what would you say you kind of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you feel like you got something out of it? Do you regret it? Are you quote
Mhm.
unquote happy that you experienced that brief experience, as fucked up as it was?
Yeah,
Or would
to
you
be
take it
honest
back?
with you, I wouldn't take it back. It's an experience that very few people have, which is really nice. I mean, my name and your name, there's this list online of what, 2,200, 2,300 ex-members that have spoken out. So that's not a lot of people, and we're part of that,
Mhm.
and we'll always be a part of that. It's interesting when people say, "Oh, he was an ex-Scientologist." Oh, okay, you get good conversations out of it. Um, but like For me, to be honest with you, what I got out of it was knowing that, because I grew up, both my grandfathers had come out of communist countries. Well, not one of my grandfathers had come out of a communist country, and my paternal grandfather was raised. He was born today in 1927. He would be 96 years old. So he was born in 1927 in Hungary, which was a fascist state, and
Mhm.
then he survived the war. He was in the resistance. He went through a lot, and then from 1950 to 56 for 6 years. So he would have been, in his 20s at the time. He was 6 years in communism. So it's a pretty unique experience to live under a fascist state and a communist state and not be
Wow.
30. Like, I can't
Wow.
even believe
Wow.
that. My other grandfather on my mom's side basically lived through World War One, World War Two, both of the Balkan wars before World War One, and also there was a war between Turkey and Greece in the 20s. Like, there's a lot going on in my family, and I always grew up with those
Wow.
stories. So I always, we always wonder, like, would I have been, would I have done something really terrible had I been commanded to? Like, that's always something that
Yeah.
people always
Great
think
question.
about, like the Red
Great question.
Army. Would I have joined the Red Army and done atrocities? Would I have, obviously being Jewish, I wouldn't have been able to join the Nazis, but in another life, let's just say, because I knew people when I lived in Germany, by the way, who were former Nazis, and I knew people up until a gentleman who just passed away just recently, who was part of the Hitler Youth. So you know what I mean? What
Mhm.
I have done, and the sad answer is probably, unfortunately, I probably would have done that knowing
Yeah.
what I know about Scientology. Like, had somebody come in and push the right buttons at the right time, I would have probably done that. Now, I don't want to think like
Yeah.
that. I would
I
rather think
understand.
that had I lived in during the time of slavery, I would have been an abolitionist, but I don't know that. For
Yeah.
example, had I, we'll never know for sure. But what I do know for sure is, I became a radicalized Scientologist and a
Mhm.
fundamentalist, and I
Me too.
probably would have done a lot to defend. So, under
Yes.
another set of circumstances, under a different lifetime, take away certain things like being Jewish, or take away certain things like being born at a different time. Who knows, right? It's a question. But unfortunately, you and I know what it's like to live in that situation. We even though it's just brief for me, I do know what it's like now to sort of live in a totalitarian state. And my
Yeah.
grandparents lived in that. I mean, that's what they came to Canada for. And that separates us from almost every other person in the world who grows up in Canada or the United States.
Yeah.
Even though we have problems in both countries, I know we downplayed in Canada, but we have social issues, just as much as you do in the United States, okay, or anywhere else. And so, yeah, I know what it's like. And it really frightened me that I became a follower and not a leader. And I think when I left, I became much more rebellious, more cynical, which is not always good. But now I wouldn't
It can
trade that
be.
experience, because,
Yeah.
first of all, I can't. So I can regret everything for the rest of my life, but that's toxic and not good for your personality or good for your mental health. But I'd rather just embrace it. So what do I know? Like, what do I know now? Well, now I have an idea of what it's like to live in a totalitarian state. So now, I'm studying history. History is full of that stuff. It's full of people being radicalized, not always in a religious sense, okay, yes, but also being radicalized by nationalism, or radicalized by a revolution, or radicalized by a political ideology. And so when a couple of years ago, when I wrote an essay, 20-page paper on Rosa Luxemburg, who was a communist that started a revolution after World War One in Germany. Well, when I was reading her stuff, she was a radicalized, idealistic, this is the truth and there's no other truth, and this is what the working class wants. And I was reading like her words, and I'm thinking, yeah, this person is detached from reality. She doesn't speak for the working class, but I kind of understand where she's coming from. So
Mhm.
I can feel my way around these kinds of radicalizations and these these very kind of authoritarian belief systems, and I wouldn't be able to do that without having to be in Scientology. So
Yeah.
it's not a good thing, but it's also
No
not a bad
shit.
thing. I mentioned before, silver linings. You have to look for them, wherever they are. So
That's well said, man. Yeah. As much as it destroyed my life. I mean, it took my family away,
yeah,
and it really. But you know what? I say in one way, it's a great gift. I don't want to do it a
yeah,
second time. I could only go through that one time. But man, what an experience to again make you question everything, because I was so
yeah.
terrified. I'm not paranoid. I just, like I said, need
Mm.
facts and info before I believe again, because it's so. I didn't know the tools, Mark, that of love bombing,
Yeah.
which
Mhm.
HG Tudor, this narcissist, was teaching me about. I happened to run across his information, by the way. This is a narcissistic psychopath, a self-aware psychopath that I interview on the channel. We've done 9 interviews so far, and I happened to run across his information when I was on a one-on-one relationship that absolutely mirrored Scientology. So you can get the tools of
Yeah.
being in an abusive relationship, I realize, are exactly the same as being in a group
Yeah.
dynamic with a narcissist at the top of the pyramid and everybody
Yeah.
else subservient below them. I mean, it really is just the same
Yeah.
thing. Which is what's so terrifying, Mark, because this guy, L. Ron Hubbard, who should have been thrown in a mental institution, destroyed, died in 86, and has captivating
Yeah.
the minds of my parents and a whole bunch of other people simply by knowing the playbook. And if people aren't aware of it, like me and you, you'd recognize the red flags right away now, right? Based on your experience,
Yeah.
you wouldn't,
And
somebody
again,
comes up to you in the same way.
well, one thing I wanted to say too. So when we were
Mhm.
talking about the different groups I encountered, one group that I encountered, which has a presence in Santa Monica, is called the Soka Gakkai International. They're a
What's that?
Buddhist group. They're a Buddhist group, and they
Mhm.
come out of Japan. So back in the day, in like the 13th century, 14th century, there was a Japanese monk called Nichiren, and there's it's considered to be an unorthodox version of Buddhism.
Mhm.
There's 3 groups within Nichiren Buddhism. There's a mainline group or a mainstream group that's pretty accepted in Japan called Nichiren Shu. But then there was another group called Nichiren Soshu, and in the 90s, there was a lay organization, the Soka Gakkai, and they were expelled from the Nichiren Soshu because the Nichiren Soshu priest group um, thought that the Soka Gakkai was becoming more cult-like and more devoted
Mhm.
to their cult leader and so forth. And so they're all around. They have a center at 26th and Pico, which is close to Santa
Really?
Monica College. And
They're in
they
LA.
also have a big tower on 4th Street in Wilshire in Santa Monica, where they have the headquarters of the Soka Gakkai USA. And so they're a group where their Buddhist practices, they chant really fast. And so they chant a phrase in Japanese, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, but they chant it like really fast. And they also pray really fast. And they're a group where, everyone's nice and, you get into it. But then if you go to more than a couple of services, pressure becomes, then they want you to join. When you join, you accept what is called a gohanzo, which is a piece of scroll with some Japanese calligraphy on it. And you're supposed to chant before this gohanzo. You make a shrine out of it, and it really, that was when my red flags kind of went off, because people were like, "Join! You should join! You have to join! You should join!" I was just like, "Come on, guys! Like, I'm just here to do some chanting or whatever." And some people were really nice, and there was a student group at Santa Monica College. They're involved in campus groups, and they do some nice, charity, social justice work, and whatever. But they were very like aggressive, and my red flags went off, and that was like very early on. I think I just got to Los Angeles, so January, February, March, April 2009, and then I got really like, I'm not going to do this anymore. This is reminding me too much of Scientology. Another
Mhm.
thing is very much how Scientology is into postulates, this idea that
Yeah.
like The Secret, the
Exactly
law
like
of
The Secret.
attraction.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's nonsense, but they're into that
Mhm.
too. So if you chant
Really?
for something, you'll get it,
Yeah.
which is not Buddhism, by the way. Nothing that I just said has to do with Buddhism at all. They also go looking for members. They proselytize. Buddhism hasn't proselytized in many years. They used to. That's why they're spread throughout Southeast Asia. But they don't proselytize. I mean, you want to be a Buddhist, you come to them. It's like being Jewish. You go to them, and then they tell you the process. You go do the process. But they don't proselytize. So this group, and the devotion to their member, to their leader, and they also have a political party that they're affiliated with in Japan, which is very conservative.
Of course.
And yet in the United States, like most Buddhists, are very liberal. They're very progressive. So I found out a whole bunch of stuff. I kind of like doing chanting sometimes, but this was like hypnotic, fast kind of chanting. And so that was one of the first groups where I was like, okay, I'm not just going to jump into it head first. I feel very uncomfortable, and like I don't want people to, I don't like this. And that was it. And so I have books, by the way, about them and things like this. But I'm just not really, I don't know, into it. And another thing is they tell you can believe in whatever you want, which is coming from Scientology, which you can't. And then they take up a lot of time because you have to volunteer in their centers. And so there's a lot of stuff that they won't tell you right away. What they tell you right away is, okay, you become a member, you accept this Gohanzo, you just chant 20 minutes a day, twice a day. But what they don't tell you is then, you've got a membership fee, you've got to put in volunteer hours, and basically you'll be spending all of your time in these centers, essentially working for free or for very little money. And so, yeah, it's very popular in Los Angeles. They have also a center in the city of, not just in Santa Monica, mind you, but in the city of Los Angeles. And there's smaller groups that are around in the different communities in LA, like Venice and Mar Vista and, Pacific Palisades and whatever. But to me, I just was very apprehensive. So that was the one where, when I started figuring out, like, okay, even before I knew of Steve Hassett, even before I knew of anything, that spoke too much overlap with Scientology that I felt. And I just decided, okay, this is a group that I'm not going to spend time in, even though, again, I did like a lot of the people, and I did like some of the practice, but unfortunately there were just too many red flags.
Bring up some of those red flags. I don't have my bite
Yeah.
model on standby. Otherwise, I'd pull it up right now. But GJ just reminded me of something.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad that you didn't.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're considering that before taking the leap, GJ. I remember a while ago we were talking. You left a comment about Christian Science, right? And my grandmother was in that. My grandfather was a Freemason, and I told you guys I got a hand-me-down for my 21st birthday. I had this really gorgeous, it had to be expensive, Freemasonic ring while I was a Scientologist, knowing nothing about it. My sister was a Scientologist, escaped with a psychopath to New Mexico and got sucked into his religion of choice, which was Mormonism, and then got sucked back for her to get back into Scientology, and specifically to get her grandkids back into Scientology. It was disheartening watching all this shit go down. And then my grandmother was a Christian Scientist. And that's what Val Kilmer was in, by the way, or is in. And also it reminds me of the JWs, because which some gal, posted a comment the other day that, oh, it's not a cult. No, they don't cover up childhood sex abuse. No, it's not a destructive cult. Well, just for me, man, to bat through all the arguments, that bite model is absolutely perfect to discover whether, like you were saying, Mark, a cult is what we're talking about is a destructive cult. So you can be totally into something, and it can be an obsession without even slightly being a destructive cult. Some of the red flags are, well, let's take the JWs and Christian Science, which have this, as a JW, you can't have a blood transfusion, for example. And Val Kilmer almost died from cancer because he refused a treatment based on his Christian Science beliefs. These are, these are really, and then Scientology, you can't go see a psychologist or specifically a psychiatrist. There's people that need real mental help. And yeah, I would agree with him on the fact that we overdrug our kids. Absolutely. I mean, you just throw them
Of
on some
course.
fucking thing. I mean, you got to get to the root of the problem and find out where it's coming from. But
Yeah.
that saves lives and people need it. But for L. Ron Hubbard to black and white say you could never go see a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever, these are red flags, especially when someone says, it's really weird, Mark, because as soon as somebody says you can't do something, Doug, usually that's the first thing I do. But I didn't do that with Scientology for some reason. There must have
Yeah,
been
I know what you mean.
yeah. You know what I mean?
I had seen a psychologist when I was, 20, and I didn't have a good experience. So that's what led me into Scientology, thinking, well, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They don't know nothing. And so there's
Yeah.
one, you always grandize or oversimplify. Like a bad experience becomes, well, if I had a bad experience with one psychologist, then that means that they're all crooks and they all don't know what they're doing. And of course, the environment in Scientology saying, yeah, of course, yes, so did
Yeah.
I. And none of that is
Exactly.
healthy too, because there's so many psychologists out there. Just like anything else, you might have to try a few. You're
Yeah.
not going to get a one size fits all. And you're also, I think, in my culture, I mean, or my generation, because I'm a millennial, I'm born after 1980. We want the quick fix. So we want the pill that cures everything. We want to go in one session of therapy and be cured of everything.
Yeah.
We demand now. Everything has to be perfect. And with just a little patience and with just a little humility and with just a little practicality, you can find good whatever you're into. You can find a good community, you can find a good social community, you can definitely find a good therapist if you want, and a lot of people I think need it too, so you just have to be relaxed. You just have to try it out. And if one doesn't work, it doesn't mean everything doesn't work. That's black and white thinking, which is also part of a cultic mindset. It's
Exactly.
either works or it doesn't, which is not true. It's either right or it's wrong, which is not
Right.
true. You're either black or white, which is not true. And psychology is either going to work for you the first time you do it, or it's all junk. And again, it's not true.
Right.
And so that's another thing that's fed into people. It's just on or off. And unfortunately, there's a lot of middle, a lot of gray. Unfortunately.
That's another area that I love to live in nowadays, is the area of not only uncertainty, but there are shades of gray. It's just,
Yeah, of course.
we had such a fundamentalist attitude as Scientologists. They absolutely make you a fundamentalist. Part of that, Mark, is because the tech works. If it doesn't work, it's because of this, that, and the other thing, and it's always your fault. It's a missed withhold, it's a
KSW1.
misunderstood. Yeah. God, again,
The
if
first
only I
thing you
knew
read on a major
that,
service,
go
No, the
ahead.
first thing that you read on a major service is if it doesn't work, you are not doing it correctly, or it's not being applied 100% correctly 100% of the time.
Is that true, GJ? Because Val in particular, and I thought it was a Christian Scientist thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. They do forbid certain medical treatment. That's why Val Kilmer had to have his family force him to get the treatment, because I'm quite sure that's part of one of their doctrine. But correct me if I'm wrong.
It could be that they've changed too, because I've never been to a service or anything, but I have been to a Christian Science church
Oh,
for
really?
in Toronto, they have something called Open Doors. So basically, a ton of religious and non-religious organizations will have open houses in the summer on a particular weekend, and I think it's like the first Church of Christ Scientist in Toronto, which is near the university. They had their doors open, and that's one of the first questions they asked: do you have no treatment whatsoever? And I think what they do is, back in the day that was true, but I think as things have gone along, they do have prayer circles, and then I think they are allowed to take medication, but there might be also things that they're not allowed. Like, the answer I got was kind of vague, so I figured that some things might have changed, but then again, they might still be in that kind of mentality where they would rather pray first, and then maybe as time goes on, then they might neglect an illness, like in Scientology, where you have to audit, first, and then by the time you discover you have cancer, it's already in stage 4. That's the feeling that I got,
Yeah.
but I could be completely, wrong about that. But that's just what I got from my one, small brief open house thing
Yeah,
of,
I
of
don't know
the
enough about it
particular
either,
group.
GJ,
Yeah.
to because I don't know all the beliefs. I looked into Christian Science, and to me, it definitely seemed to fit that bite model in terms of a destructive
Yeah.
cult. And they don't have to fit
No.
all the aspects. It's just
No.
Scientology fits almost every one of them. Part of that is when
Yeah.
it comes to behavior modification. Do they make you wear different clothes? Do they change your name? In terms of thought
Mhm.
control, do they use hypnotic techniques? Do they implant phobias of the outside world or about anything?
Yeah.
Let's see. Emotional manipulation. I mean, Scientology, for example, is filled with that. It's always your fault. The amount of guilt that stacks up on you in that cult is amazing. So these are, I gotta, I wish I could just provide a link for that because I have a sheet that's all. It's in one of the videos that I put out. I think with Marcus's girlfriend, we did. She's an ex-Mormon, and I threw it up in that
Mhm.
interview with her. But if you guys want to reference to that, because it can just saw through a lot of the bullshit. If you want to just know, if you're in a group or in a one-on-one relationship, you can just go down the list and say, are these things happening or not? And if you check off a lot of them, then it's something you need to run from. Okay, let's see what
Yeah.
GJ has to say. Yes, I'm close with one of Val's best friends, and many of his Christian Science friends encourage him to get treatment. Oh, okay.
Oh.
It was his choice not to do so. Are you sure about that? Because I'm for
Hmm.
quite sure they have a policy. I watched. There's another Christian Science. Oh, what was it? GJ, I know they have a policy on this, man, because there was a video that I'm drawing a blank on with another ex-Christian Science, and he was discouraged from certain medical treatment. But again, I don't know the details, so I'll have to take your word for it. I don't know enough about that to get in too deep. What
It
I do
also
remember
could be.
about Christian Science, GJ, is my grandmother, who was a Christian Science, and my
Mm.
parents, who were Scientologists, were always trying to convert each other. My grandmother knew that she had the right tech with Christian Science, and my parents, you
Yeah.
should see them go at it. It was just so hilarious. You know what, Mark? Any universal truth is surely going to unite all of us in something we can all agree
Yeah.
on. Having all these different beliefs, there must be truth in all of these things, but we need to filter out the bullshit and stuff and kind of maybe, we're one human family. Can't we all just get along and figure out what some
Yeah.
form of truth is so we don't have to battle about my religion is better than yours and this and that? I don't think such a thing
No.
exists. I don't think anybody has the correct religion. I mean, that seems like so
No.
ridiculous to me now, but it didn't when I was in Scientology. So I understand the thinking that I have the right answers. And you know what, Mark? What if we're wrong? I mean, I saw this. Marcus's girlfriend sent me over a clip about Mormonism, about how it was a South Park clip because we opened up her interview with a clip from South Park, which was
Yeah.
hilarious. They take the
Yeah.
piss out of religion, man.
Dum dum
And
dum dum dum.
yeah. And they're all in hell, right? And then Satan's up there, and he
Yeah.
says, all the people are like, "So which religion
The
was right?" And
Mormons.
he's
The
like, "It's the Mormons."
Mormons.
Yeah. So shit, man. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're wrong.
I don't know.
Hey, I'm willing to
I
find
know.
out at death. I don't need to know the answer to that beforehand. Yes, they would rather
I
pray first. Okay, you're spot on. My best friend on the board at her Christian Science church, and her belief is that if she is unable to heal an ill, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense, GJ. But we
Yeah.
were told the same thing as Scientology. Do your OT
Yeah.
levels and get rid of the invisible
Yeah.
beings on your body. Go in session after session. And then if that
That's
doesn't
right.
work, go get your cancer treatment. My dad, by the way, had cancer, and he's an OT8. He's been at the top of the bridge for 20 years. And even though it's encouraged, not to see psychiatrists and stuff like that, and they're anti kind of medicine or whatever, it's not totally embedded where Scientologists, if they are having a problem, like, thank God my dad went and got cancer treatment, because
Yeah.
they don't want you dying on their lines. They don't want an OT8 to pass away. So they will
Yeah.
send people like my dad that have cancer and give them permission. But still, like you said, GJ, what they do in Scientology is similar to that. Pray first, i.e., do the auditing first. And if that doesn't work, get your ass down there. But sometimes that can be too late. Kirstie Alley died apparently of colon cancer, which was something that could have easily been fixed earlier. And I've seen this so many times. It's just conjecture, but I've seen this
Yeah.
a million times where Kirstie probably waited till the last minute or tried to audit it on OT7, or maybe I think she's been OT8 for a while. It's all mind
She's
over
she's
matter
8.
in a lot of these new age cults. Yeah. It's mind over matter in
Yeah.
Scientology, Christian Science, and all that. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with that. Of course, your perceptions are going to create your reality, but the New Age takes it to the idea of, we were just talking about it, Mark, this secret
Mhm.
postulates and Scientology are very similar. It's this really egotistical, childish way of looking at the world where if you just think it enough and hard enough, then it will manifest in the physical world. I mean, this thing about postulates, Mark, and tone 40,
Ridiculous. Yeah.
completely wrapped up in that. Did you ever buy into that and sit there with your little, did you
Yeah,
go
sure.
use postulates?
Yeah, sure. Again, it's a nice way. One of the things is why people believe in things like astrology and superstition. And I have a lot of family that are so freaking superstition. My mom, for example, my grandparents was because there's a lot of stuff in our environment that we have no control over, but we
Yeah.
have to feel like we have control over it. And so if we only do these certain rituals, if we only, in my mom's culture, okay, and this is true. If there's a thunderstorm outside, the oldest lady in the village would go outside in the rain with a knife, and they would throw the knife into it, like into grass. And if it stood upright, if the knife stood upright in the grass, the rain would go away. I mean, this is old wives' tale. This is like stuff that people didn't know what the hell rain was from, Balkans of the 15th century or before. And so the old lady had to go out and they had to have certainty that the rain would go away soon. Well, nobody knows when the rain is going to stop. Not even meteorologists know. You know what I mean? Things happen that are totally out of our control. So there's a lot of things that people want to feel that they're in control over, and health is one of the biggest ones. And so the idea that if laughter is in many ways can help people, but it's not going to cure anything. It's, laughter is a good medicine, not really the best medicine. Medicine is the best medicine. But, people have to feel like they're in control over stuff. And if they're not in control over things, then it makes people panic, and people can't think about that. So this is why we have superstition. This is why, people say like, well, yeah, I didn't pray enough. I didn't get a job.
Yeah.
My job. I didn't get a job from a job interview because I didn't pray hard enough,
Yeah.
or whatever. Or I'm doubting something because I'm losing control of my faith. Well, I'll need to pray hard enough, and that kind of stuff. Again, it goes back to just being toxic things that circle around in people's heads.
Yeah. And again, we're back to the,
But point I did want.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're circling back around to the similarities between all these things. Whereas a Christian
Yeah.
might pray to God, bring me good fortune, or this, these satanic cults, which is what I consider Scientology. It's all about using your
Yeah.
postulant and intention to bend your will against other verses, against other people's thoughts and ideas. It's like such childish, silly voodoo shit. But we had a scientific
because
name for it.
people.
We weren't praying; we were doing postulates for God's sakes,
Yeah.
Mark. It has a nice ring
Doesn't
to it.
matter. There's a lot of people who aren't religious who have complete faith and not the actual study of science, but a very like philosophical idea of science, where then science
Mhm.
becomes the only source of human knowledge, which is not something like if you take a science class in university today, you're not going to be told that science is the only source of human knowledge. You're also
Right.
not going to be told that science can tell us who to vote for. And you're also not going to be told that science can tell us how to be moral. And that's a lot of things that is in these popular science and secular groups, where they've elevated science to almost a religious level. And there's no evidence of that either. You just have to take a
Mhm.
basic science course at university. And so, yes, let's be skeptical. Let's use science
Yeah.
to get vaccines and to make people better and to improve cancer treatment. And there's a lot of things that science can do that religion interferes with in many cases, which is wrong.
Mhm.
When they protest evolution, evolution is true. It doesn't matter what religion you are. But when science itself becomes the only source of truth, then the people who are in these little groups, whatever the name of the group is, then all of a sudden they're in control because they know what the truth is. And
Mhm.
most of those people aren't scientists. You know, most of the people that you find in skeptics groups, atheist groups, humanist groups are not scientists. They're not practicing scientists because most
Well,
scientists
yeah.
reflect most people in the world, which means that they're either religious or spiritual, which is differs in America. Probably more scientists in America are not religious, but in the rest of the world, most scientists are. So that's another thing. Elevating non-religious pursuits into religious pursuits, like politics, is also not helpful as well.
Exactly. Great. Well said, man. I really like the way you articulate your thoughts, Mark. I mean, Scientology definitely did
Thanks.
not mess up your brain because you're very linear in your
Not too
thinking.
much.
Yeah, GJ,
Um,
I know. I would love to talk to Val. I mean, I know his voice is bad, and who
yeah.
knows if he'd come on the channel. I'm certainly not going to bash him on his religious belief or anything. That guy is an
Yeah.
amazing actor. I put him up there with Joaquin
Yeah.
Phoenix too. Speaking of Joaquin Phoenix, you know,
Children of God.
one of my Val is such a good actor, and he seems like such a sweet guy. And if you guys haven't checked it
Yeah.
out, that Val documentary, as heartbreaking as it is to watch,
Mhm.
it is. I thought that was a good documentary. But Joaquin Phoenix, you know, that family's kind of tight-lipped about their upbringing in the Children of God cult. River was sexually abused, I
Mhm.
think, at the age of 4. And you know, that definitely contributed, in my opinion, to his untimely death, getting onto drugs, etc. I mean, that's one of the most vicious cults there is. We're talking about the Children of God. And if my brother had died, I'm not saying the Children of God off them. Of course, they didn't. But I'm just saying that he took to drugs and alcohol, and he was a very brilliant actor, like his brother Joaquin.
Yeah.
And they won't talk too much about it when, crikey, man, if that was my kid and I was the mom, the mom in particular is kind of controlling and shuts down conversations. But that would be one of the first things I'd be talking about if I was Joaquin. But hey, I'm not them, right? Guys, we've been going for 2 hours. We're at 1 hour and 15 minutes. So if you have
Really?
any, yeah, I mean, it goes so
Wow.
fast. I guess we'll wind down, man. I wanted to say, first of all, Mark, thank you very much for coming on. I love speaking
Thank
with you,
you.
man.
Thank you,
We
Doug. It's
can
always great. Yeah.
do another one if you feel like it. I don't want to pressure you, but
Yeah.
I just love these
I
conversations.
love this. We'll do another one 100%.
Do
100%.
you guys Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, man. Do you guys have any last minute questions of anything that we might missed? We'll hang out for a couple minutes. Just want to make sure that we
Yeah.
didn't miss anybody that really wanted to ask a question that I'm sure I skipped over in the comments. So now is your last chance. Going in 5, 4. Hey guys,
Good option.
I really appreciate you guys in the chat. We have such a lovely community. Goldie, thanks as always for, you know, I know you're super busy on Erin's channel. She moderates over there, and somehow she always,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
makes it over here and just creates a lively chat. Angela, thank you very much for setting up the Discord. Like I said, guys,
Thank
it's in the
you.
link. Please join us over there if you can. I have a feeling that thing will be kicking off and we can do some things that we can't do here on YouTube. And if you have any trouble, like what's up there right now, because I'm just learning it myself. And Marcus spent 2 hours with me on the phone trying to get me up to speed on Discord, and Angela spent God knows how long trying to get me up to speed too, as well as setting it up. So she gave me a link that I put in the description box of this video and the upcoming one with Alexander. And if you type on it from there, look for Dazed But Not Confused. That's all I can tell you right now. If you have any problems, please leave them in the comments here on this video. If you have any questions that we weren't able to get to that you want to ask Mark, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer the
Yeah.
questions in the comment sections after this. Oh, and one other thing, guys, in case you don't know, because YouTube kind of changes a couple months ago, to find this video and all the live videos, it's not on the homepage. They don't put it on the homepage anymore. So there's 4 or 5 different tabs that you'll see at the top of your YouTube channel, and you know, like playlists, videos, etc. Just go to the live section, and that's where you'll find this video, which should be posted immediately after we're done. A lot of people haven't been able to find the fucking videos after. Just wanted to let you know that.
Oh.
And Jen, you still can't access Discord. Well, we're gonna have to work this out, but because like I said, the link's there. I wish I could help you and tell you more. But if you go to that link and type in Dazed But Not Confused with a space, just, you know, and the confused has a Z, it should pop up. But like I said, we'll work that out and get everybody over there. Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining us. Mark, have a, you know, some people are saying in the chat too, 2023, the year of maybe not just Scientology, the beginning of the end of Scientology, but perhaps a lot of shenanigans that have been going on recently will be set right. So this could be a very,
Hope so.
I think it's going to be a challenging year. And it's also, hopefully, we'll see a shift and some positive changes too, because the last few years have just been something straight out of the Truman Show, have been absolutely ludicrous, especially where I live. Okay, guys, have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you here on Tuesday. Please join us when Alexander comes to join us. Okay, take care, guys.